Well, before we start question time today and get down to the business of business, we've got something special for Joe Calhoun.
Yeah, it was a little anticlimactic, Bob. I think everybody kind of felt like the Celtics were going to win that one last night. That game 4 in Dallas was a little embarrassing, and so when they got home, I think they really had to rock and roll last night. It's nice. Listen, the Celtics now 18 championships, most in the NBA and NBA history. Just passed they were tied with the Lakers, the dreaded evil Lakers. And so we have surpassed them now and have the most championships. And I'll just leave you, since I'm a Celtics fan from a long time ago, so let me just leave you this. We've won 18 championships. 11 of them were won by Bill Russell. Bill Russell won 11 in 13 years. So I don't know that any team will ever come that close again. And another little tidbit, too, Bill Russell was the first African-American head coach in the NBA. He was a coach and a player at the same time and won championships. Never going to see that again either. Anyway, go Celtics.
Well, you can smile for the rest of the day, but we're going to bring in Steve Brennan now and get back to business.
You're going to make me frown? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Steve.
Joe, question today. Is there a lot more risk in the S&P 500 than people really appreciate, that it's not this diversified, very broad, multi-sector approach to investing, really in what people think of as the entire economy, the entire stock market? And I'll throw a couple things out there specifically we've talked about. We've talked about how much of a big bet there is in AI and some of the big components of this, how concentrated it is in just a few stocks, and within that, just the technology sector, how the multiples of that part of the market are really extremely high. And the historical precedent for all this is not very good. But maybe the big thing people are talking about is AI, and that ain't looking like it's going to pay off to the level people are pricing to some of these stocks. Your thoughts on just me throwing all that out at you?
Well, that's a lot to digest. But look, I think that like it used to be, you bought the S&P 500, you were buying the market. You know, it was represented the economy to some degree. It wasn't that concentrated, but that's not true. And listen, I'll say this: at times, the index has been more concentrated. Even back in the 1950s, it was very concentrated in a few companies, but I think it was a very different economy back then. But look, right now you've got technology at about a third of the index. You've got, if you include the communications sector, which is half Meta and Google, so I would count that as technology, then you get up to about 43%. That's unprecedented. We've never seen the index that concentrated. If you took technology and you weighted it based on revenue, it would only be 11% of the index. And if you weighted on profits, it would be 20% of the index, and now it's instead a third. So obviously you've got a big bet on technology here. And really what's happened here is NVIDIA. And so I think that, you know, you really are making a pretty big bet on artificial intelligence if you buy the index here, because you've got, like I said, roughly half the index, almost half the index, 43%, I think, is in the top 15 names. And of those, it's a lot of technology. Now, NVIDIA, you know, is now 7% of the S&P 500. It's a huge company now. But NVIDIA has been through this before, where it had a boom from crypto mining and went up 450% and then lost 2/3 of its value before Chat GPT and AI came along. So it's not exactly, we're not talking about a boring company here. This thing can rock and roll. But let's talk about AI for a second, because I think it's interesting. As I said, I think this is a pretty big bet on AI. I think there are other ways you could go about this weighting mechanism, but you're not going to keep up with the index unless you weight these 7 companies. Really, if you weight them differently than they're weighted in the S&P, it's going to be hard to keep up, at least for now. I think that's going to change. I don't know exactly when, but history says it will change. You have periods where the index gets more concentrated and periods where it gets less concentrated. And I don't see how you can really make the bet here that it's going to get more concentrated when it's at an all-time high. Chat GPT and AI, these LLM models, I think there's a lot of hope here. There's a lot of expectations built into this market about what this can do to the economy and what these things can do. And I think people just don't understand them. You know, these LLM models, they're not sentient. People have this idea that they're logical somehow and that they are going to give you a logical result, and that's not true. They're going to give you a result that seems logical because all it's doing is stringing letters together and words together in a way that's pleasing. Point is this: look, there was this idea that if you just scale these things, you give them more and more information. If you train these models on more and more, these large language models on more and more data, that they'll get better. And I think we're 18 months into this, and they're not getting better. We just saw yesterday McDonald's entered a trial. They had a partnership with IBM to do artificial intelligence in the drive-through for an AI bot to take drive-through orders. Well, it didn't work. It didn't work because the bots didn't recognize accents. It didn't recognize dialects, local dialects, and so forth. They got the orders wrong. Again, it's one of those things that sounded great in theory. We can eliminate that person at the drive-through and just let this bot take all the orders, except it doesn't work. All you did was tick off the customers going through the drive-through, which is not a good thing, man. People need their freaking McDonald's. You know, you don't want to be making those people mad. So, look, I think that there's the possibility here that maybe AI is not all it's cracked up to be. And I've been a skeptic from the beginning, and I know that people probably look at me like I'm nuts, but I don't really care. I don't see how these things improve from where they are. Listen, ChatGPT, the CTO, just had an interview a few days ago. I forget where I read it. They asked her about, what's the next iteration, the next thing. And she goes, well, we've got some things in the lab, but they're not that much of an improvement. Well, I think that tells you really kind of what you need to know right there. I think they've peaked. Now, I do have a theory that the more information you give them for a while, it gets better. And then once you pass a certain point, it's going to get worse. Because if you think about it, suppose you add all the information on the internet that's true, which would maybe a fraction of the internet at this point. I'm not sure what fraction it is, but I bet it's not half. But suppose you just trained it on the stuff that you knew to be true. Well, once you get past that, you start adding things that aren't true. Isn't that going to make the model worse? I think that's what we're finding out. Anyway, the point is this: companies have spent a lot of money on these chips from NVIDIA, and they're spending a lot of money trying to make AI work. And so far, we really haven't seen much of it work. There may be some applications for it that are going to make some individuals and some companies more efficient, but it is not the widespread panacea that people think it is. And so, look, this will go like every other boom goes. Every boom like this, everybody buys everything, and they and then it crashes, and you see what survives. I've done this multiple times in my career. I was a skeptic of the .com boom as well. I looked like an idiot for a whole year in 1999 when they were kiting Cisco to the moon. But, eventually it works out, and you do find out that, hey, this wasn't, the trees don't grow to the sky. I think the same thing will happen here. It's just a matter of when. When are people going to wake up? When are companies going to wake up and say, you know what, we spent a lot of money on this stuff and it didn't work? We'll see. The question is, do you want to take that kind of risk? And that's all I'm trying to point out here. Look, there's lots of people on the S&P 500. That's your prerogative. If you want to own it, that's fine. But you got to understand the risk you're taking. And I think it's pretty big right now.
What would you like to know from Joe? Put your questions in the comment section down below.